So, Scott, you've been paying a lot of attention, as I think everyone else has been, to just the countless number of mass shootings. But you had some opinions on that. What were they?
Well, not necessarily opinions based on, any kind of researchable fact, but we've had over 100 mass quote mass shootings this year, and if it's kind of hard because if you look at what's classified as a mass shooting versus what's classified as gangland shooting, it doesn't change the numbers too much, and it's pretty obvious which ones were gang related and which ones weren't. But there has still been a vast increase in, you know, kind of one man shooter getting back at somebody. We've seen, uh, uh, job related stuff recently. We've seen uh, just almost like just random stuff, like in Bryan, Texas, and we've seen from everything from Whole Foods or whatever the grocery store chain was to, and we've seen about one or more person from a few different demographics, few different skin colors, a few different religious backgrounds, and it kind of spooky how it's just kind of wow, to me it's kind of like, have people been saving up, during lockdowns and during the time their anger and hatred to kind of explode here as things start to open up as far as society again. And you know, if for lack of a better term, it's kind of like a COVID syndrome, as far as I think. That's because I don't think there's been any particular trigger other than people being stuck in their houses and sitting in front of their computers and getting angrier and angrier.
Yeah, no, I see exactly where you're coming from, and I'm kind of torn myself because usually the first 3 months out of the year, um, actually, no, that's not even fair. The first like 6 months of the year, we actually see more violent crime, and I don't know why. I really have no idea. And it's just FBI statistics, and it's not like it drops off that much. But you're right. I do see this like I think it's kind of interesting because I was listening to um, I can't remember her name at the moment. It's the Rad of Center podcast, and basically they were talking about how half of the country is really, really excited to get back out there. Uh, then 25% of the country really has like formed this like COVID identity and they're more scared. And then you have 25% of the country who has almost maybe developed forms of like agoraphobic and
Oh yeah.
really do have that like anxiety, and you can't hide anymore in your house. Like there's a number of people who I think, um, as bad as it sounds, this was actually very therapeutic to be like, hey, you don't have to go to the stores anymore. You don't have to deal with crowds anymore. In fact, stay away from all of them. And and they were just throwing out like completely just dumb numbers. I'm sure, people, "No, not 50%. I know. They were just throwing out crazy numbers, but I think there's a portion of people, and I know this because to an extent, I suffer from a tad bit of agoraphobia, something I've got to keep like practicing like a muscle, or working out, I should say. And so I get it where if you don't have that, that kind of like mental illness can really,
Can fester, yeah.
yeah. Well, we've seen,
And we do know there's been a large increase in worries about people's mental health associated with being maybe, if you're not continually exposed to at least having to deal with not necessarily horrible crowds, because I've, even many, many years ago, I got stuck in an IKEA on an opening day. My God, I wanted to shoot everyone around me. I couldn't even move. People were sweating on me,
oh yeah,
and yeah, I had to leave the store. And I have no problems with human touch or any phobias from sweat or anything. It was just too many people. I don't want to smell five people's breaths at one time, and I
Nick,
wasn't in line for anything. So,
I think
so I
and like
understand.
somebody too, who suffers like I like at times crippling anxiety. Could be nothing that, and I'll sit there and something will just hit me and dread will just fall over me and it will, it'll impact me. That feeling of I'm gonna die, my family is going to be screwed. That it hits you right then, like something again. You know, the first couple of years of having that disorder is horrible. And after that, you
Yeah,
kind of start to learn to get through it. You understand what's going on. I laugh at myself now when that happens to me. I'm like, oh, so
yeah. I mean,
stupid.
all
But
of us
like,
have some of that to a level.
but I think it was the owner of the Texas Roadhouse, the steakhouse. He committed suicide recently, and he had long haulers, and I guess from COVID, and I guess his wife said he developed anxiety disorder, and that's what made him kill himself. And it can get that dark. It can get that bad. And I think this kind of touches into something we were talking about, last show or the show before when we were talking about how to analyze people. And I was like, well, if somebody tells you if they only had one day to live that they would, murder somebody, that person's probably a sociopath. Because you
Yeah,
think about, you compare those two situations, and yeah, if you have a person who has either developed anxiety, maybe from COVID, I don't know. Like that would be an interesting thing. How many of these mass shooters had COVID and have long haulers? I
yeah.
don't know.
They've definitely
That's
dropped some
probably
numbers on people who've had alterations, not just like from their smell or from taste, but on, the brain not producing endorphins and not doing what it's supposed to. I mean, which is really weird. You think like, how can, if that was a prevalent thing from just the basic flu, even if it was a bad flu, we haven't really seen, or at least they haven't ever reported, that there are secondary effects and ramifications of having a severe flu, or from COVID. They've given us those numbers, though not numbers, but they've told us that there are lots of people who are suffering from secondary cognitive issues based on not even necessarily the severity of their COVID, just as a residual.
yeah, yeah. They commonly, yeah, the long haulers thing, happens to be a majority of those cases. But and even if that's just too far of a stretch, cool, I get you. But nevertheless, people have developed some other disorders during this last year, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, all of that I think lead into it. And I think, when we are talking about mass shootings, the one thing that always comes up, gun control. What are we going to do about it? How do we stop it? And it's such an interesting conversation, I think, because this is one of those scenarios where I always feel like I have the answer, but not with this one. With this one, I don't know. I've recently got into Alert. Alert, they do videos. I don't. That's not like their job. What they do is they train people how to be the good guy with the gun, and it's funny because like, and by the way, it's like Alert, Alerrt. But I was watching some of their YouTube videos, and I just kept watching them because they'll take somebody like you or me and they'll put them in a situation of a mass shooting. The person usually goes about a minute in 20 seconds before they're either shot, they shoot an innocent person, like they fuck up, it's too hard. And so like and that's why they say, well, you need to train. But the thing is Alert, to be the good guy with the gun. They say you need to train every day. In fact, they recommend that people train about 300 hours a year to be the good guy with the gun. They also don't happen to mention, because I just wanted to look into this, but you know, you can train with Alert for
Yes,
only
and you're saying to
60.
be like an effective
Yeah,
somebody who
the
can,
the the
handle
yeah,
this.
the argument that always comes is, well, we need we don't need to get rid of guns. We need a good guy with a gun. Their thing is we want to teach people how to be a good guy with a gun.
Yeah, I don't think there's a negative to that at all.
There's a giant one. Hear me out. It's 300 hours is what they recommend. And even then, they say, no, you have to keep training all the time. And it's only $60 an hour to train with them. So who has that? You know what I'm
Yeah, no
saying?
one,
Like
not even
it,
police have that training.
it's your qualification. Like we can't be good guys with the gun. And
But
not to
that
mention,
sounds like there's, I don't want to
no,
say that, but that sounds like they're trying to sell you a service because our police force doesn't have anywhere near that kind of training. I don't care if there's SWAT or terrorism task force, they probably don't get that kind of training. So that sounds like they're trying to sell you something.
but look how bad our police are handling those situations too,
Yeah,
though.
they usually shoot a few innocent bystanders and standers, and then pump a couple rounds extra into another cop and put about 50 rounds into the one person they were trying to shoot.
No, it's bad. I mean, how many times have we seen mass shooting situations where we find out, yeah, a cop accidentally shot one person or two? But it's because, like, I've even seen videos where we have Navy SEALs, and they ask them, like, hey, their thoughts on this? What would be the best way to almost protect our churches, our shopping malls, our schools? And then they ask him, would you want to be part of this team? And every one of them says no, hell no. Because number one, to be the good guy with the gun, we would need a legion of God. Well, okay, add up every every shopping mall, every school, and then put at least 5 guys who have that capability in those areas. Yeah, you can't do
Yeah,
it. We don't have enough people.
they don't even have police for that. You usually have
No,
one resource
no.
officer in the school, and that's it.
And here's these FBI statistics. People probably disagree, but again, you can look it up. It's FBI statistics. So out of all mass shootings, about 1/5 of them are actually stopped by a civilian. Out of that, 90% of them are from an unarmed civilian. Only about 10% is it from, and again, you're cutting it by the fact that out of all mass shootings, 1/5 are stopped by a civilian. So at the end of the day, you're actually looking at like a 3% chance that a good guy with a gun stops the situation. So I mean, so that kind of wipes that whole scenario out of like, oh, good guy with a gun. No, okay, well, you know,
Anyway, it does happen. There's been, I know of at least 2 or 3 church ones where somebody in the church was armed. I know of a couple that were in a casino where some like 90-year-old guy pulls out his gun from his sock and does it. I mean, it is rare, but a lot of times, just because somebody carries a gun, whether it's it's probably concealed if they're in a place of business, doesn't necessarily mean they have the mental fortitude to engage somebody who's actively doing stuff without caught making the situation worse or getting themselves killed. People still get terrified and freeze up and etc.
oh, of
But
course, yeah. I mean, our military, some of the best trained guys will freeze up. I mean, what was it in Vietnam? I know this is Vietnam, different scenarios, but I think our average like hit per shot was like 12%. When you're shooting those like machine guns at other people, there was a 12% chance that they hit the enemy. Like because your adrenaline's going up, you're freaked out, you're scared, and you don't see it coming. That's the thing like with the alert videos that I think are kind of fun, is they'll say, okay, from the moment you enter this, you are in a training scenario, and the guy, kind of walking around in like a school, like, okay, where do I go? Where do I go? And someone just pops out and shoots him. Like, he's stupid. Because you're not ready. And they all say, well, I wasn't ready. Well, yeah, no, you wouldn't be
yeah,
ready,
and you can't really compare military stuff. A lot of that's like spray and pray. They're fighting dugout to hillside to that kind of stuff, dodging mortars, and they're just hoping somebody shows their head. I mean, I'm sure if you had a sniper, that their hit
Well,
and
of
kill
course,
ratio would
of
be
course.
a lot better. But once again,
But
it's
snipers are also safe. They don't usually they don't have bullet fire at them.
sometimes they're usually in a more covert position in order to gain to put that big rifle and sit there and tweak it and try to find their target. But yeah, I mean,
With the Coriolis effect, yeah.
I would say that generally there are, for the amount of guns that exist in America, which are over as much as the population of America. Now, does that mean everybody owns a gun? No, it means some people own 5 guns and 5 people own 1 gun and 10 people own none guns. But for the most part, I don't see a solution completely to anything. Red flag laws, only work when they're applied. It seems like all of the last few shooters that have been on the FBI's watch list, they weren't actually being watched. You know what I mean? Even if they were reported, even if, and even some of them are very young, 19 years old, they were still able to just jump on by and grab a couple guns, whatever they were. And you would think that when somebody would make a purchase like that, even if they were allowed to, then some kind of, investigative force could be deployed, just somebody to track, to follow, to watch this person, because I don't know what the statistic is as far as how long after a person like that purchases weapons, that's a known person, how long they use those weapons? Did they sit on them for long? Because as far as I know, I don't think most of these people sat on their weapons for very long. So, with America having as gun friendly as we are, and as let's say as our positive relationship with guns is going to meet just as much of a negative relationship, it's you can't have one or the other. If we want the ability to defend ourselves and defend ourselves against the tyranny of others and our own government, it's going to come with the possibility that people who shouldn't have their hands on guns and have lots of issues with being sociopaths, or it's just going to come with the territory, because you can't get rid of them.
No, yeah, I agree. And I do think, to be fair, because it seemed like I was hitting against gun owners. I am definitely pro 2A. I'm definitely on that side. Uh, I think you get down a slippery slope of, like, well, you were kind of referencing the mass shooting in Indianapolis with the 19-year-old kid who was like a red flag, still was
Mm-hmm.
able to buy guns. His mom was reporting him in. I mean, this is where you get people who are going to push on, any sort of state officials and say, well, this is why we just should ban guns. And there's you can't come back at that and be like, well, yeah, well, we can do this. Well, you tried it, didn't work. And you're like, oh, well, son of a bitch. I mean, and for me, I think this ties in what we were talking about earlier. And this is one of the big reasons why I'm a huge proponent of Medicare for all, because I think this isn't a gun problem. It's a mental health problem. And
Right.
I've heard that over and over, especially on the right. But when it comes to free healthcare, when it comes to things like that, then the right says no. Well, okay, you got to be one way or the other. Okay, like, you can't just, well, we're just gonna let the people who are mentally ill just have guns and kill everybody. No, we got to treat people. We've got to get rid of the stigma of mental illness and any sort of just abnormalities one might have in their brain. But the other thing too, and I think is really important, is starting with our school, and starting real young, like a grade school. We got to start teaching, and parents, by the way, who all the people who want their schools to raise their kids. No, you got to do this too. You got to teach coping skills. If we can teach kids how to cope with trauma, with just not getting their way, but teach them to cope with problems, then later on down the line, they will have that in their repertoire. So when something does go bad, I mean, I've talked about how one of my I had a friend who was a mass shooter. Dude had no coping skills. He would throw a fit and he would walk off the job site if things didn't go his way. So you could see where, I mean, at the time I didn't see, but you know, hindsight being 2020, like, oh yeah, I guess I could see where that guy would just go off when a girl turned him down and he pulled out a gun and started shooting everybody. I get where that happened. Um,
Yeah, I think sometimes the right tends to conflate. They said, well, it's a mental health issue, and I agree. And it's like, well, then if it's a mental health issue, if we had more, medical coverage and it covered things that had to do with, mental illness directly, it's kind of, they're afraid of, okay, well, then what is classified as mental illness? And, it's kind of like, they're always afraid of the government tracking you. And me being like, I don't want any government, that is not 100% necessary a lot of times. Even I'm not worried about the government not tracking me for this reason, because they already are.
Well, not to mention that, but I mean
Yeah,
HIPAA as well. I mean, you're not going to go to a
there you go.
government doctor. You're going to a doctor. It's Medicare for all. It's
Right.
just, yeah,
Which is the same issue the right would have with traveling and having to show your COVID papers. And that goes against HIPAA right there. That's a privacy invasion based on medical records. And while
that's
I
a weird one.
understand,
That's an odd one
yeah,
though, because we've had, that's not more um, evasive than it has ever. I mean, to go to what is it, Sudan, you have to have a yellow fever shot. You just have to. They will not let you in the country without that vaccination.
oh, I mean, that goes into now.
You
I'm
know?
talking about even just traveling domestically between certain countries that have, say, given out the same amount of vaccines and or at least have the same amount of people who are closely enough treated, and there's not some freakish rise. I mean, that's where it gets to be so messy. I mean, of course, if you go, there's lots of countries
Or
where,
schools, man. Schools. I mean, you
yeah,
can't.
schools,
You have to have
but at the same
certain
time, we know
vaccinations.
kids. Yeah, but kids. But yeah, that's right. But those are usually diseases and that children that affect children. Like measles, mumps, polio, and all those other things that they're not adult-based diseases. They can affect adults, but for the most part, if you get them as a child, they do the most damage when they're young. But COVID is the opposite of that. And we're not worried about our little kids that much. I mean,
Right.
kids are
Well, right now
not
that
on the scale.
that variant is could be potentially bad for him. I mean, but no, I mean, no, I'm just saying it's not anywhere different. I mean, there's there's at least 26 countries that you have to get a vaccine if you're gonna go to them, and like it does beg the question. I don't think the government is ever going to require it. Never. Government will never do it, but they will let. I mean, the private companies, sure. I mean, and then it becomes
Private companies, I could see. In other countries, we have there's no diplomatic treaty to just like let our people go freely, because other countries are clamping down on immigration to a point of like almost zero. So, and we're not. In fact, Biden's wanting to increase the amount of, refugee status people that we have, when we know that the camps that they've gone down and said, okay, this is, the Biden administration has finally said, oh, it's really, really bad. And over 50% now, because they've all been in a closed area. I mean, what did you think what was going to happen when 10% at the beginning started to come in with COVID, and now they're spreading, the adults are spreading it, the children are spreading it too, but the children aren't the ones getting bad, horribly sick from it. It's the adults now that it's kind of started to lose control over. So I mean, I don't have an answer to the, like you were saying, it does start at home, and it also can be at school, where we teach people these are the freedoms that we have, and these are the responsibilities as adults that you will need to understand once you gain these rights as an adult. I don't think schools are doing any of that. I don't think they're doing it even for the First Amendment. You know what I mean? I don't think they're teaching, whether it's government class or whether it's sociology, or I don't know what the curriculums are to a point where
and I'm
they
talking way younger. And it really, for me, like I said, it starts with coping skills. And the reality is many times as people complain, they about education, about the schools, every teacher in the book will tell you you need to actually be a parent. You
oh
need to
yeah,
sit down and work with them. I don't, and I'm not trying to sound, biased, or I'm not trying to sound, like a prick, but I don't have a single friend who's a parent who is a good parent. I really don't.
yeah,
I hate
no,
to be
I
that
know
way.
I know very few, and it's
Weekends,
our fault.
they want to go drink and hang out. They want to watch TV. They want to listen to, you know, music, whatever. they
They want
don't.
to act like they're 16 again, and
Right.
they've got two small children that they're not paying attention to, or they pass off on their grandmother. Or, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, it's not just a Gen X, and it's a Gen X and millennial problem.
You
We've
know,
screwed up our kids.
and by the way, if you want to tell me, yeah, but I've got a second, third job. No, that's true. And look, that's a problem too. Like, you should only have to work one job in the richest country in the world, and also, to give you the ability to raise a child. Like, there's a number of scenarios. Yeah, then you get into the people who are like me, or you know, um, you like we're ambitious. Like one job's not enough. I got to go do this. I got to go do that. I got to, you're constantly trying to do more and more. Well, unfortunately, and you know this, I have to end up canceling things because I got to be a parent. And it, but we just
Yeah, and
see
it
that.
hasn't made me so hurt and butthurt that I don't want to be your friend anymore.
Takes too much time with his kids. No, but it really does start from there, and I think that's for me. Those are the two major things. We got to fix the healthcare system in our country. I think that'll just pay off in spades. I mean, in so many ways. And then the other one, yeah, is like just, and I hate to go that route, but just to raise your kids better. Like take the time. And by the way, a lot of parents don't know these things. I mean, because their parents didn't raise them right. You got to go back to grandma, you know, maybe even great grandpa and grandma before, you find proper coping skills and,
Yeah, I mean, our value system is pretty messed up. I mean, it really is. When I see someone else's children, they'll buy them a four $500 iPad. They'll smash it or lose it, and they'll just buy them another one. I mean, my God, what are you teaching that child? That, first of all, money isn't important. That I can have anything I want, instant gratification. That there's no repercussions for me getting something expensive. They don't understand what the value of a dollar and how hard it is to work and earn. I mean, the tree just go, and then you expect them to understand how to value human life and deal with anger and coping skills, and then put a weapon in their hand. Oh, Jesus.
yeah, no, and what you mentioned that last part, so I'll just add this too. I love video games to death. I played probably too many video games, and whenever the violent mass shootings happen, video games are like one of the major targets. And I don't think that they should be, but you have another situation, kind of like another thing that I love is vaping. It's parents. Because if you buy your kid Mortal Kombat 11 and they're, you know, 8 years old, and you say, here you go, and throw them off into their room, and all they do is either play games where, like Call of Duty, where they're shooting people,
Get over here.
or killing people brutally, and you're not there to say, hey, this isn't real, right? You know that this is, you have the time to talk them. And by the way, I'm not even talking, there's 5-year-olds I know. Very, very liberal parent. It was one of my friends. Very, very liberal, super like, oh, Maddow is like her queen, but her kid runs around saying the worst things and playing the most violent video games without any structure at all, and he's 5. I'm like,
Oh,
you can't. No, you
so
and
you're
then
saying you want to
she's,
babysit, right?
and this person is like, well, I don't understand why he's so violent. Like I caught him
Oh,
stepping on his hamster, and I'm like, well, because he thinks that he doesn't understand because you're not there, and you're not like, look, to an extent, I'm a helicopter parent. I really am. In the extent that like my son, if he says damn, he holds his mouth and he's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Like, like, cause I'm that big on, I don't want cuss. I say cussing shows that you have a weak vocabulary, shows that you're dumb. I don't let him play violent video games. I don't let him see violent stuff. Um, and namely because I say that it's lazy. It's a lazy, lazy way to tell a story. And,
and a
and
lot
all
of
I'm
those
doing,
things, you do need to be an adult to cognitively understand the dissonance between what the violence is that you're seeing on TV or a movie or a video game or on the news, and understand that is an unacceptable part of our society.
Completely agree.